After his slow start, Alex Ovechkin is heating up at just the right time.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the Sirius XM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Only. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about what is behind Alex Ovechkin's hot streak here. And it's not just recently, I guess it's been going on since the All-Star break, but what's behind it and how is he helping fuel this Capitals team? I'll talk about that in this show. A little bit later, we'll talk about how it's not only Ovi, that Spencer Carbery is pushing the right buttons at the right time and helping the Capitals make a push for the playoffs. I'll talk about that. And then a little bit later, I will talk about your comments from YouTube and subtext and Twitter. But just to get it going here, talking about the season of Alex Ovechkin. And if you are an everydayer of the show, you know I was very candid. I was very upfront in my feelings that I thought that this wasn't going to be the year for Alex Ovechkin, that he was off to his slowest start, at least goal scoring wise, in his entire career. Now, there were people that agreed with me. There were, staunch, hardcore Alex Ovechkin fans that said, I don't care how he's playing at the halfway point of the season. He's going to turn it around. He's going to do it. Just you wait. And that is ultimately what he did. Off to his slowest start in his entire career, he defied odds and all the insiders and what everyone thought he was going to do. And he is starting to be a key contributor by scoring goals, being key on the power play, and ultimately helping this team make another push for the playoffs. But let's rewind time a little bit and talk about what some of the insiders and some of the talking heads said. The big thing, about Alex Ovechkin was that it was father time, that, father time punched Alex Ovechkin squarely in the jaw, and father time is undefeated and all those sorts of cliches. And that's what people are talking about. They said the two discouraging trends for Ovechkin this season are that he is playing over a minute less per game than his career average, and he is getting roughly one shot on goal fewer than he was in his career. So these are all these people just kind of spitballing and stabbing at information, trying to come to terms with how one of the greatest goal scorers of all time was snake bitten to start the season and what was behind it. One of the other things that was behind Alex Ovechkin's lack of success was the Caps power play unit. It's got the best percentage, 34.3 in the league since that 5-4 overtime loss to Dallas. But before that, it was quite horrendous. Washington before that was converting on a putrid 8.3 of its power plays this season. This is easily the worst number in the NHL. That was before the All-Star break. So I think that, the power play, of course, did have something to do with it. His limited shots that he was getting, where he was getting shots but not high-quality shots, were what was behind it. Was it father time? Was it age? Was it any of those things? It really doesn't appear to be the case. I think that Alex Ovechkin solved the Rubiks Cube that was in his own head. He took the face off the clock and looked at the gears and said, this is what's wrong with my game. I need to work on it. If you're asking me, I don't think it was so much about, that he's getting fewer shots or less time on ice or, father time, any of that. I think it was the confidence that scoring goals provided, that something magical happened to him mentally during the All-Star break when he opted not to play in the All-Star game this year. There was quite a bit of talk about him not being selected, but then it was made apparent that he said, no, I don't want to play in the All-Star game this year. And I think that he was really reaching out and saying, I need a break. Guys, give me a break. When I come back, I'm going to be a changed man. And there were skeptics. I was skeptical a bit as well, but he found a way to do it. And guess what? That trip to Dubai is what really saved Alex Ovechkin's season and ultimately what is helping propel the Capitals. So talking about Alex Ovechkin this week is the first Star of the Week. Quite an accolade, quite an accomplishment for a guy that's washed, that's old, that's been there. Father Time has punched him in the jaw. He's over. He is getting it done. He has now scored 26 goals on the season. Earlier this season, when he was playing his worst, he was projected to score only 15 or 16 goals, and now he has already scored 26. Again, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I kind of doubted Ovechkin this season. I wasn't so sure he was going to be able to turn it around because there was nothing that gave evidence to me that he was going to be able to do it, but he has done it. And let that be a lesson to anyone that doubts the great eight, that he can do it. He just has to look internal and he can find a way to get it done. Since January 27th, Ovechkin's 18 goals are tied for the third most in NHL, behind only Edmonton's Zach Hyman with 21 and Toronto's Austin Matthews with 19. So in elite company and turning on the Jets at just the right time. If he has been scoring at this clip all season, he would have been on pace to score 61 goals. Quite stunning about Alex Ovechkin and how he's getting it done. With 18 goals in his last 24 games, he's just the second player age 38 to produce at that rate, joining Gordie Howe in 1969. So he is, despite the fact of how slow he started the season, he's aging like a fine wine, even though we didn't know it to start the season. Quite stunning for Alex Ovechkin. Ovi has been red hot since the All-Star break, but as of late, he's been white hot. Ovechkin has 8 goals in his last 5 games, and 3 of those games were multi-point games. So when did Alex Ovechkin's luck change? Was it the All-Star break? Well, it was a bit before then. And I think that this is something that we will discuss for quite some time this season in 2024. Despite, what happens with the Capitals, do they make it to the playoffs? Do they make a push for a Stanley Cup? Regardless, this is quite the season. An anomaly for Alex Ovechkin, how he started his slowest season ever and found a way to turn it around, silencing the critics. Ovechkin scored in Dallas on January 27th, the Caps' final game before a 9-day break for the All-Star game and the bye week. That is when the internal switch was flipped, and it was full go for Alex Ovechkin. Since returning from the week-long vacation, Ovechkin's shooting percentage is an impressive 20%, which is markedly higher than his career best shooting percentage of 15.4 in 2019 and 2020. So what's behind his success, and what do his teammates think? Listen, the teammates, John Carlson, Tom Wilson, they had his back the entire way. They never doubted him for one moment. When everyone had written off Ovi for this season, some of his teammates that had been there with him the longest had his back. John Carlson says, I don't know what else to say. It's not surprising, John Carlson said of Ovechkin's resurgence. It's obviously great to set and see what's going on at a pivotal time of year. That's huge. The captain leading the troops, we've kind of fallen in line. And I've talked about that in this show all season long. As Alex Ovechkin goes, so go the Capitals. It's not just the goal scoring thing, though. Ovi is the heartbeat of this team. And when he's in the right headspace, let's just say it's contagious. If you take a look back when Alex Ovechkin was the most snake bitten playing some of his worst hockey, so were the Capitals. It's interesting. And then when he turned on the Jets, he started scoring. He started being a key contributor. Well, the Capitals fell in line and they started playing great. Now, to remember history correctly, To start the season, he was getting assists, just not as many goals, but now he's multidimensional. He's getting goals and he's getting assists, and it's quite something to witness. I think right now you can see how we play. I think everybody have confidence. Everybody understand the situation, Ovi says. How I said a couple days ago, that's why we fight all year. When we finish this season in 2 weeks, we want to keep playing. And if the Capitals do, in fact, keep playing, they are going to do it with Alex Ovechkin leading the charge. There is a reason that he wears the C on his chest because he is the leader. And it's quite stunning when you think about it, how the Capitals are getting it done. And I'll talk about this in the next segment. With not as many players on the ice, we're minus Ovechkin and Kuznetsov and Tom Wilson suspended. They need someone. Alex Ovechkin is the right leader at the right time, and he's taking this team where they need to go. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about how it's not only Alex Ovechkin. Spencer Carbery, the head coach of this team, is pushing the right buttons, pulling the right strings at just the right time. Why is he the perfect coach for the Capitals this season? I'll discuss straight ahead. We're past the halfway point of the season. It's almost the end of the season, and regardless of where we are in the current standings, it's been up, it's been down, but the Capitals are up. I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And let me tell you something, guys. I was not the guy that was that into fantasy hockey, but now I love it. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Capitals fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Spencer Carbery is the perfect coach at the perfect time for the Capitals. And what am I talking about here? Let's take a look at last season when it was Peter Laviolette, kind of this old school coach that had kind of old ways of doing it, kind of rough around the edges. There wasn't a lot of players that came out openly and said he was difficult to work with, but it was kind of inferred. There was a rift between Peter Laviolette and Evgeny Kuznetsov. We know that for sure. And Nick Dowd had kind of an interesting look on his face when he was talking about Peter Laviolette's time with the Capitals. I just think that, he wasn't the perfect coach for the job. This isn't to disparage Peter Laviolette, as he has the New York Rangers sitting in a good position. I just think that Spencer Carbery is more of a hand in glove, plug and play, perfect coach for this team. And he's finding a way to get the most out of this team at the most important time of the year. If you are an everydayer of the show, you know when I talked about that Elliot Friedman was talking about when he was speaking to Brian McClellan, the GM of the Capitals, that Brian McClellan had some reservations about Spencer Carbery's coaching style. Defensively, they weren't in lockstep. They didn't necessarily see things eye to eye, but he was willing to accept him the way that he is, the kind of coach that he is. And it's been a good fit for the Capitals as he is getting the most out of this team. Talking about him here, since coming back from the NHL All-Star break, the Capitals have gone 13-8-2, winning games that many had not circled them as winning. You take a look at the game against the Canucks, the Canes, and Jets, missing Tom Wilson a majority of the season, missing Nick Backstrom and Evgeny Kuznetsov, getting dealt at the deadline. The team is getting it done. And a lot of that has to do with head coach Spencer Carbery. The Caps missed the playoffs last season with Peter Laviolette for the first time in years. And this has the makings of being a great turnaround season. Quite a big thing. And if we want to take a look, most recently, it was against the Jets. And you take a look at the first two periods, the Capitals were getting outworked. And then Spencer Carbery had a bit of a come to Jesus moment with the Capitals in the locker room saying, listen, you guys aren't playing horrible, but I know you can give some more. And that was the right shot across the bow of the Capitals as they turned on the Jets. John Carlson, Alex Ovechkin were clutch for the Capitals after that. Carlson led the charge and was motivated after Carbery's speech. Just win the game, John Carlson said. John Carlson slammed home the puck from the point. I just knew we had more, he said after the win. I know we had more. It might not be pretty and polished, Carbery says, but I know we have more given the circumstances, and I just felt whether it was the afternoon or the Oshie ceremony, we were just, the first was okay. The second, we weren't good at all. I need more. And he is quite the motivator. He is not a guy that hides his feelings well. He's always clenching his jaw, and the veins are sticking out of his forehead and neck. And you can see him talking under his breath. He cares a lot. TJ Oshie was talking to Al Koken after the game, and Al had questioned him what was said, at the intermission to motivate the players so much that they found a way to get it done. It started with the power play right there. Oshie said we had a couple power plays before that weren't too sharp and not up to our standard. And then the boys just followed up after that. Then Ovi went on to score 2 goals as well as the Capitals did the improbable, taking down the Jets by a score of 3-0. Before that, when the Capitals went out on the Western Coast road trip, they got shut out by a score of 3-0. Quite something. We couldn't get in the offensive zone. We couldn't recover pucks. Again, our group, we talked, and then we looked at him in the eyes and said, hey, we're in game 70 now. And that sort of snapped us out of it. Absolutely. And that's probably the best period of the season. That was Spencer Carbery just laying it out the way it is. This is not the beginning of the season. This is not even the halfway point of the season. We are at the end of the season. And if we have any hopes of making it to the playoffs, we've got to start winning games. We do not have the luxury of losing 1 or 2. If you lose 1 or 2 right now, you could very well be outside of the playoff picture. Spencer Carbery was the right guy, has the right rapport, and what he said with the players definitely, obviously resonated as the Capitals turned it around and picked up a huge win. Guys on the bench totally engaged, Carbery said. It just flipped in the third period when we needed it the most, given our circumstances, our best period of the season. And if that was not a game that didn't have you pumping your fists and screaming into the air, I don't know what will. And there's been quite a few of those as late. If we take a look at the game against the Jets, that was one of them. The Hurricanes, that was another one. Those were 2 games. And I talk about this a lot, that kind of mentally, I think as hockey fans, there's the optimistic part of you that's like, yeah, they're probably going to win that game. But inside you're like, oh, the Hurricanes and the Jets, they're really good this year. But they're finding a way to get it done, despite what any preconceived notion that Capitals fans or anyone else has, that there is no team that they're going to play here in the upcoming stretch that I'm like, they're out of it. We're talking about the game Tuesday night against the Detroit Red Wings, considering how the Capitals lost quite handily to the Red Wings last time, that yes, I, as a matter of fact, do think that there is the possibility that they can win the game, and a game of utmost importance. As you know, the Detroit Red Wings and the Capitals were all tightly compacted in there in the hunt for the playoffs. But Spencer Carbery is the perfect coach at the right time, and I think will probably be a candidate for head coach of the year, Jack Adams Award. I really think that's the case, and it wasn't always real apparent. As we started the season, there was a lot of questions about the Capitals' poor play. How much of it had to do with Spencer Carbery? We've talked about in the show, and I've talked about here recently about that there was a disconnect with the defense. It was quite a bit of a different defensive style that the Capitals were used to playing, but they found a way to figure it out and get it done. And it's interesting. It took quite a while for them to figure it out, but once they figured it out, a great style of hockey. And I, for one, am really happy that they went with Spencer Carbery. They could have gone with the easy thing. They could have gone to the NHL's recycle bin and pick out one of the old coaches that's, been around the league, kind of like Peter Laviolette. And that would have been the easy thing to do. But I'm glad they took a chance on a young guy, the youngest head coach in the NHL, and gave him a shot because it has paid off in spades for the Capitals. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, I will talk about your comments. What do you think about the Capitals' play as of late? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So if you are watching or listening to this podcast, you obviously know my thoughts on the Capitals, but I like to hear your thoughts on the Capitals. And the very best way to do it is on subtext, where you can actually text me your questions. We can text back and forth talking hockey. It's kind of a cool thing. Check it out in the show description. If you ever want to talk Caps, I'm always here to talk with you. Just do it. So, and one of the questions does come in from subtext right here. It says, I think the team has finally bought into Carbery systems. Kirk Muller has worked on the Caps PP and the PK, and it shows. One thing that I've noticed about Ovi is the scoring goals from the different places on the ice, which baffles the opposition goalies because they seem to be in place for the one-timer from his house. Now that he's scoring from all over the offensive zone, it's a new nightmare for the goalies. Biggest thing I've seen also is the defense between the blue line, and they are smothering on the forecheck. Very true. A dynamic goal scorer. One of the things, just to kind of dovetail what he's talking about here, is that it was predictable. For the longest time, he would set up from his office, and that's where he would score goals from. I will say that a majority of the goals that he still does score, especially on the power play, are from his office, but he is getting to get them from different angles. Especially we've seen it here as of late, not on the power play, or it was the power play when it was the Connor McMichael and Alex Ovechkin up front, net front. We're starting to see more of that of Alex Ovechkin. Not something that you've really seen historically. To talk, what the person on subtext was talking about here, setting up from your office. It's the crashing the net. Good things will happen if you crash the net. You'll be ready for the second and third rebounds that potentially, if it bounces off his pads, you can knock it in there. That has not just worked for Alex Ovechkin. That's worked for a lot of different Capitals players. We've seen that with Sonny Milano. We have seen that with Hendrik Slop here. It's one of the things that I think that the Capitals had talked about for a long time this season. It was just implemented here somewhat recently to just keep crashing the net, drive through the crease. And that's the biggest thing. Make slot passes, get as close as you possibly can, because you seem to have the best results. Now we think back to John Carlson firing home a puck there near the blue line. And if you can do that, that's good too. But I would say that the Capitals' secret sauce as of late has been getting a net front and waiting for those second and third opportunities, or the wraparound where you can tuck it behind his pad. But Alex Ovechkin, for sure, is more of a multi-dimensional goal scorer this year. This comment comes in from YouTube. The name here is Myth BHAVD. I can definitely say that this has been an entertaining season, up, down, up again, and riding the tail off the playoff dragon. I seriously hope they get in just to see if they can manage to pull it off. Me too. Because I had questions. I think a lot of Capitals fans had questions. They're getting it done. A big contributor always on this show is Javi Ronaldo. I've never been so happy to be totally wrong. Keep it going, boys. And Ovi, you are a medical marvel. He is defying odds. A lot of people said it. How is Alex Ovechkin getting it done at his old age? Old age. I'm 47. He's still a young man, if you ask me, but he is getting it done. Eric Deberg here says, need to win at least one of the two Detroit games. I think they're going to get it done Tuesday evening. Another comment comes in here on YouTube. This was an important win. I thought about Winnipeg was a difficult matchup for us, and in the second period they were, but after getting smashed in Winnipeg and then coming back with a win like this quickly answers one of the worst losses of the year. This team has a lot of pluck, a lot of bounce back, and it's going to see Ovi hot. When he gets hot, he gets very hot. Let's go, Caps. Beat Detroit. That is what we're hoping for, that they can do it. A huge win. You think the momentum's going great now. See if they can find a way to take down Detroit. Huge. Wayne, the era 27-12, I think one thing we've learned about the last 2 seasons is that a healthy John Carlson is a huge difference maker to the squad. 25 plus minutes of solid defense, and the offense makes the game, the rest of the team, much easier. Of course, I've heard about people talk about in years past that, how about trading John Carlson? And you can, plug and play someone in there and eat up a lot of minutes, but will they do it as good or as well, shall I say, as John Carlson can do it? I really don't think so. John Carlson, huge, a two-way defenseman, can also get involved in the rush and scoring, a huge defenseman for the Capitals. Dylan Counts, 45-31, went to the game amazing. It's always best if you can see it in real life, and if you can't, the television is fine, or TV, or your phone, or whatever the case may be. Listening to John Walton on the radio is always good as well. But it is cool to see it in real time. I wish I would have been at the game, but it sounds like it would have been a really great one to see in person. Another comment coming in here. Ben saying it since the beginning of the season, end of last season, Chucky is a way better goalie than Kuemper. Why Washington was so determined to have Kuemper be our starter, I have no idea. Well, I think at least in part, if we take a look at why they went with Kuemper, he has the pedigree, he's got the history, he's got the Stanley Cup that he's got on his resume, and that Charlie Lindgren was an unproven commodity. We saw how great he was last December, and then he faltered. So, sometimes people start to think, well, history's going to repeat itself, and good thing we have Kuemper. As it turns out, that Charlie Lindgren is the right goaltender for the Capitals right now. Clutch, huge. Some of these games they would not have won had it been Kuemper or anyone less in net. I have no doubt in my mind at all. I've talked about that in the show. It's an interesting position for the Capitals to be in, as they have Clay Stevenson, who is the number 1 netminder in the entire AHL, and Hunter Shepard is number 2. So I think that the Capitals have to have kind of Darcy Kuemper on a short leash. It's a weird thing to say, just based on the fact that, how much money they're paying him, his contract. But you take a look at his last 2 poor starts, and, like I talked about, that the Capitals don't have a lot of time to dilly-dally. They have got to find a way to get it done. I think that Hunter Shepard is the guy. And, it's tough. I said before that if they give Darcy Kuemper another start, that if he falters again, but what did I talk about in the show already? There's not enough games to just give him one and potentially lose a game. So it's a difficult position for the Capitals to be in. I think the only hope that they could hope for is, later on, towards the playoffs, you get an expanded roster, that kind of thing, that potentially they could have someone like Hunter Shepard or Clay Stevenson on the roster. Otherwise, it's going to be a tough question for Brian McClellan and Spencer Carbery, a difficult conversation about what to do with Darcy Kuemper. I don't know if the team and the organization is totally out on him, but, losing 2 games in a convincing fashion, and considering where the Capitals are right now and all they've had to fight through, for me, if I was the head coach or the GM, I would either go with Hunter Shepard or Clay Stevenson. Right now, probably Hunter Shepard, just because he has more NHL experience. An exciting time to be a Capitals fan. Make no mistake about it. The game Tuesday evening of utmost importance. Make no mistake about it. Make sure and subscribe or follow to Locked On Capitals on YouTube or your favorite podcatcher of choice. It's pretty much just Apple or Spotify. There's just these other ones that no one really listens to. But in any event, I'm so glad that you guys are along for the ride each and every night. On YouTube, the channel is growing. The amount of downloads on audio is growing. It's huge, and I have you guys to thank, and it means the world to me. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel. It's on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Listen, there's ESPN, there's Fox Sports, but they're all kind of meh. some guy's outraged. Someone's always outraged. If you don't like the outrage and you just want to hear your sports news, get it for free. It doesn't get any better than free. And it's on YouTube and it's on the Amazon Fire TV Channels app. And I think you will love it. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.